Well, hello, if there's anybody that can hear me out there in internet land. I'm going to save this for some, send this to the two different places I send things to. Oh, I should have checked the volume first. Test, test. Okay, that looks good. Yeah, baby, I'm okay. I'm streaming. How are you feeling? Says Alan Silverestry. Yeah, baby, I'm okay. Okay, well, looks like my volume's coming through okay. Big delay, though. So, I just wanted to, let me say this, share this with the folks I normally share it with, since I can. That's a picture of Atlas, from using the filters for the different spectrographic readings that they've got. I don't know if they chose the colors in order to accentuate the differences. I don't know how much, if they enhanced them, I wouldn't doubt that they did. But I don't doubt that also that the next level can put out all kinds of colors. So anyway, I'm gonna get off of that. Okay. I'm done. So, oh, good. Thanks for that sound check, Alan Silverestry. Appreciate that. And Hambone Jones says, I appreciate you, Sawyer, and thank you. I appreciate hearing that from you. And Hambone Jones, there was that song that was the Hambone. Anyway, being silly. But I know that probably goes back a long ways. But it tickles my funny bone. But so what I've written here, I had the day off today, so I got to sleep in, and Kathy went out to work, and she's pounding the pavement as we speak on her way back. So I'll probably make this kind of short because I want to spend time with her exclusively. When she comes back and from a hard day at work, and but meanwhile, I got to catch up on things that are happening and all the different sources that I have for things, and I looked at a number of the things that were related to Three Eye Atlas that are coming across my Facebook feed in the reels, uh, and other things that I share a lot of them to my Sawyer Heaven's Gate page. Uh, Even just interesting. Sometimes I don't comment on them, but most of the time I do say something because everything seems to have. Well, let me put it this way: what I feel like I've observed over a period of some days now was that NASA. I'm just saying NASA because it's not officially NASA. They do say things officially, but they say a lot of things through proxies so that they can not have to own up to saying certain things. So that's the way they cover themselves. Uh, they try to cover themselves when they don't want to get in trouble for things that they say, and at the same time, they want to think about what they're going to say about things, knowing how people were going to respond to certain things. So what we got from many of the streams that I did before now that talk about, they're not talking about those things anymore. And instead they're keeping to the way that Atlas changed its speed and its luminescence, and the way that they got different reflections off of things, and could sense that there was a core that was different than the outside mantle of it, and that it was made of material that was highly reflective. Those are big points, of course, and its orbit wasn't an orbit much, and especially when it went by Mars, it changed, and it changed speed. It deaccelerated by a lot to match, but they're not talking about how it did that. It did that to match Earth's speed, which they talked about before. Okay, and they talked about it. So it's getting more and more, I think, watered down, or they talk about some things still, but they put them at the end of a long broadcast. They know that most people aren't going to go to that length of listening to it. And because they're trying to do damage control with people freaking out. Because this actually really does kind of explain how people can be dying from anxiety, fear of the unknown. It doesn't have to be a real fear. It can be the kind of fears that we've been subject to all our lives, even in movies, that promoted certain fears with us. And so if something is being talked about that boggles the mind, which the whole space alien subject does to me, even though I've been with the subject for a long, long time, it's still a boggling of the mind to think of them as real. Every time I say space alien, it's like I don't want to say that word, that combination of words. It's like it's distasteful because of how it can have several responses to it. One is that if it does boggle my mind, I don't really want to look at it because it makes me feel stupid. You know what I mean? And it sounds stupid. Space aliens, because what are our images of space aliens but from the media, from all the sci-fi movies? That's our, what we think of, right? And the whole other part of it that's the religious related to that is also an illusion. It's just our perception of what's been told to us through those record books, because a lot of them are record books of things that were being written about things that people were experiencing that took hold. I was thinking about this the other day. If you think about like the entire Jesus story as being that some individuals at different times, I guess, sat down or at the beginning of it, sat down and tried and designed something that could be used to control the people, right? So I don't think that's not true. But I assign that to the souls that we know of through our folklore and through our mythological perspectives and philosophical and religiosity and spirituality angles of the mind. We look up as the fallen angels, souls. I say souls, and that basically triggers the idea that there's some truth to all that depiction, and I believe there is. At the same time, those words don't mean what they mean to those that have seen the greater accuracy in the way that T and Do describe things. Like, you can't say that they were appealing to our religious background by not using religious terminology, and that's what happened. But it wasn't exclusively not using religious terminology, as that wouldn't be if you looked at it from a logical point of view, that wouldn't be right for them to do. If they were responsible for the whole basis of what the religion became, by bringing stages of development to the civilization, development of the mind, to be more and more civilized towards one another, and less barbaric and less crude and less negative towards others and judgmental towards others and less insulting to others or stimulating of battles and if you're trying to cultivate beings that can be their own, by their own free will, they're acting in ways that are the ways that members of the next level act. We're being trained, but it's not training to where it's the whip, even though there's a value to having some physical pain. And that's what we experience. We're physically experiencing pain because of our hardships. Now, that doesn't mean the next level's there whipping us. That's stupid. But it does require us to choose whether or not we want to be the whip on our vehicle and see our vehicle responding and uh, coaching it through calming down, and then having a more regulated response. And changing one's surroundings can help with that, and when and putting our minds on something. And it's easy to say, the method of getting rid of negativity is what I'm leaning towards, talking about, is the task we have. So that, and what that means, that doesn't mean running from it necessarily, even though it can have that periodically, to not, I can't look at this subject anymore because I feel like I'm saturated with it, and it's bringing me anguish and anxiety thinking about it anymore, and so put it on hold. Put it in the back burner. Don't look at it. Go do something totally unrelated. Get off the phone. Get off the computer. Stay. Don't listen to the radio. Go hike into the desert or the mountains or something. Go to the oceans. I think we instinctually want to do things like that because our human world is so complicated now. And there's so many things that are upside down from the way they should be or could be. I say should be because it is because of choices. But everything is doable in T and Do's mind, and there's positives that can come from every negative. But we have to seek it out. We don't have to, but it doesn't happen unless we seek it out. But we don't have to seek it out right away. We can just know that the negative we don't want around us. And that becomes a positive, making a positive out of it. And so we shut the doors in all the ways that we can. And one of the ways that T and Do gave us to shut the doors was to put up a blank cue card. Like if you were in a theater, a play of some sort, and there's a cue card to tell you what your lines are, and you're hearing those words, but what you're seeing in your head are the words that you have in your head, then you want to replace them, and you make it into a blank. So it's like the way I think about it. And then I see the blank actually in my mind blotting over the words of the thought that was causing me difficulty. Now, of course, you could use that technique. People do use that technique when they're talking with somebody else. And if they don't like what they're saying, there's a certain amount of blocking that probably happens. To where, you think you know where the person is going to say. Because you've heard it so many times, like in relationships like Kathy and I have when we get into fights. We go down the same roads a lot of times. And most of the time we do, but we shouldn't. I think to progress through those times and get in a better place about it for each of us, then that means suspending our judgment of what the other person is saying. And if they say it over again, well, then maybe looking at it in a new light, trying to look at it from what they're saying rather than our interpretation of what they're saying. Not allowing those thoughts to enter our heads. Now, this can be something that happens with people and without people, of course. Within our own heads, that's where we deal with a lot of the things that can bring us down. Whether it's something that's telling us that we're no good, or we failed, or we failed as a parent, or failed as a development of a career, or failed as a spouse, but from every failure, that's where growth occurs. When we when we rise to a failure and we no longer accept what other people say about us, even though it can still be painful to hear what other people say to us about us. It's but if each time we deal with it, we can get stronger to deal with it. And if we're not getting as emotional as we once did, I don't believe I'm not saying that the measure of how well you're dealing with something is how much emotion you have about it. That's not my place that's not anybody's place to judge. Whether, because all the things that go into emotions, are many. Hormones have a big effect on emotions. I know, because I have hormones too, in a male vehicle. And so, these are genetics that are being stimulated by the hormones. Genetic programs, but the programs aren't necessarily illusionary. They're real, like the way that this civilization has been a patriarchal society, with that lead, and how that is a strong characteristic to override, and that those that are in the vehicles that are from the matriarchy, is that the way to say that, as opposed to the patriarchy? They become the instruments of teaching the patriarchy. But they themselves can be actually not learning that neither is the end to development of the human mind. Because I think the development of the human mind goes towards genderlessness, not looking at somebody through their eyes of their vehicle and the vehicle's programming, hormonal programming as well as mental programming. The genetic strain is the mind that is following along all the vehicles, however you want to look at it. It doesn't have to be thought of as discarnates. In fact, one of the things that Tiendo said after they made some statements that said that that deceased humans were influences upon the humans that had bodies. When somebody, I guess, had a problem with that, I'm not sure how it came up actually, Tiendo said it doesn't matter whether that's accurate or not. What matters is that works, to think in terms of that another being is standing next to you trying to put you down or get you to indulge in a substance that you don't want to indulge in anymore. I say indulge because of how, I shouldn't say indulge because that sounds like a spiritual word. It's not an indulging as if it's bad to use certain substances. It's not bad. That's what the religion does to it. Makes the things that are changing your consciousness wrong things to do, even though they do have their detriment. But they also are like medicine. substances that can help us over the edge in certain areas where our genes and our biology is out of whack. You know, we've got all kinds of things in the food that stimulate, like for instance, I was walking by somebody the other day who was standing at the meat counter in the grocery store. Now Kathy and I don't generally eat beef products, and seldom cook raw chicken, and we eat eggs, and sometimes Kathy will eat like a if you want to call it a hamburger. It is. I don't know how much beef is actually in it because it's certainly got a lot of soy in it. It's a lot cheaper to raise soy, and give it beef flavors. But but anyway, we're not against it. I'm not against it. We're not like together, like agreeing to not eat certain things. We don't do that. But I'm just not. I don't gravitate to it very often. I do like ham sometimes, and I like as a kid I like things that I don't care to eat now, like liver and liverwurst. My vehicle was raised with liverwurst, which looks pretty sickening to some people. And that's okay. I understand that. I think it's kind of sickening to eat raw seafood. But I get it. It's not really a terrible thing. It's not something that I want to do. And but I'll eat some tuna because I guess when it's more processed, I can deal with it better. And we had tuna in the classroom for whatever that's worth in the early days. It didn't stay with us that long relative to the way that we went through all kinds of cleansing diets because, all those flesh diets all have a certain benefit and certain proteins, of course, and the minerals and, that are coming through those. And it's a slow-burning fuel, so it can last longer, give you more stamina, and it's good for the building of the muscles. But if you're not trying to, you can build muscle also with proteins from plants. That was proven by Arnold Ehret, in the early 1900s when he was on a mucusless diet that had no dairy or animal products. And he was in debate with the people in like 1909 or something, or 12 or something like that, that with the runners. He said that he could beat somebody in a long distance race. He could keep up with anybody that was on a meat diet. And I don't know, I think he actually did well enough. I don't know if he finished first and everything, but there's something to be said for testosterone, and we get that from meat, right? Or we get whatever is in it, in proteins and amino acids that become made into testosterone by the body. I'm not sure which way it works, or maybe both ways, and maybe other ways as well. But it does seem like males generally are more aggressive, but I don't think anymore. Really. But aggressive in different ways, and I think all that aggression is kind of more primitive behavior. In the way I think, but But then in terms of getting rid of misinformation and bad programming and and trying to stop the abuse of children, for instance, like in pedophilia and labor laws, for putting the children to work them to the bone. And I mean, you wouldn't want to have any different rules for adults than you have for children, I don't think, unless it has to do with, children need early learning. They need time to have different experiences to have a healthy mind, I think, relative to the society. So I wouldn't want to trap a child into a sweatshop 12 hours a day, and they can hardly do anything else. They have no playtime. I don't think that's a bad thing to have playtime and time to just experience life. Or what are they going to do? Think that life is terrible right from the beginning? And so, it's not that they can't grow from that experience. They can, but the next level doesn't justify abusing people to have growth. So they have ways of giving us growth opportunities very gradually, a lot of times. And then sometimes it's the karma has arose so much that humans want to kill each other and control each other and use for money, to be producers, to be users of their things, their goods, their products, so that they can continue to have money for all their personal lives and theoretical lives, or their government lives, their different faces that they have in their civic organizations and in their it's they're not, none of these are bad, except in how they're used and how others get abused by someone else's desires. Certainly the prime directive, that was one of the highlights of Star Trek, as well as showing the reality of individuals living on a spacecraft for extended periods of time, going to doing tasks, helping with situations on different planets that are happening. Not necessarily having a complete overview of everything. In fact, not knowing that you don't have a complete overview, and having circumstances where there were beings that just were beyond everybody, that could literally stop the starship and communicate with them, like I think happened in some of the Next Generation episodes, in different ways. And with the Q and everything, I think Doe liked the episodes with the Q, and I forgot what he said about it. But, the holodeck, I've talked about it before, and I'm repeating myself now, but the holodeck, was something that Doe got from Star Trek. And that's not, nobody's trying to say that T and Doe didn't get ideas from society, because they were raised in vehicles that were to receive a certain amount of a certain strain of mind. Because of the way that the strains of minds develop, whatever strains of mind are selected by the next level to develop into potential members of the next level, children in their kingdom, that's what they abide by when they start the strain. And they started the strain, the branch of the strain that we know of as the current civilization, some 6,000 Earth years away before, which to the next level is a short period of time. But that doesn't mean that the next level is is not with that kingdom the entire time. Even with, because they can do things, since they're not limited to human physics, they can do more things in the time it takes us to do anything. That boggles the mind for me to say, but I think that's true. They can do a whole bunch of things in a short period of time for a human. And they also but the things that they do might not add up to like a bucket list. Like go to the store, vacuum the pool, fix the car, take a ride in the country, all those different things that humans do, which I'm being terrible at trying to list. The next level may, have their mind on one subject during that time. During all the time that it takes for humans to do those things, to where that might be just, one experience that to a human would amount to billions of events. And we see that, Kathy was showing me a video of a cell. And I don't know if the colors were right, but if they're using the colors because of the elements that were involved, or they're accentuating them in order for things to stand out better. I don't know if they've got microscopes now that can, put the spectrograph into it, the codes to produce the different the different colors that the elements put out. The elements have color in them. It's part of their characteristic. Put out a visual impression of them. They're amazing. But, I was listening to Bob Lazar talk about element 115 with Joe Rogan, and Bob Lazar was having trouble talking because he had a little too much of some substance, I think something to drink. I don't know what he was drinking. For all I know, he was drinking an edible, like Kathy does sometimes. And I haven't tried yet because it's probably too strong for me. But, because when I use substances like weed, I use a tiny, tiny, tiny bit, like one toke is good for me for the night. Where Kathy is, has a different tolerance. But it has to do with our makeup, the makeup of our minds and bodies. Maybe more bodies than mind in terms of, like if I use too much, I get wobbly. My mind sees me as being wobbly, but my body is not necessarily wobbly. So it's not like but it can be to where I could feel like I could lose my balance. So that's a detriment. So you definitely don't want to promote that, especially when you're getting on in years, because some of that can be built into happening. It's part of the programming of the vehicles that, as the vehicles break down, they break down in ways that are related to their genes and their environment growing up, what they experienced and what they got from their, not just from the ancestors, because most of what comes from the ancestors is coming from, I think, the parents. But also the minds can be coming. I don't know for how long the discarnate minds of ancestral vehicles, how long they stay around a family unit. Because if the family unit keeps on expanding, I imagine, I guess, I don't know. I don't know if the next level has ways of regulating that so there's not so many spirits influencing us. If that's the way it works. And if it doesn't work that way, well, I just want to know how it does work. And I feel like Tiendo left us with a huge body of information that people are making into complete belief systems. Like one of them, I think, is being called the singularity archetype. I don't know if it's archetype. I'm not saying it right necessarily. But it's interesting how it has a lot to do. Metamorphosis is part of it, and a number of things that accepts the idea that there's technical. Like even invisible beings are technically in existence. So it's very good in a lot of ways, I believe. It's strange for me to hear the archetype being given as the subject, that as if it stimulated, the archetype itself is a being itself that stimulated the thinking of that archetype and the technicality of it and everything about it. That its characteristics are those things of the archetype. And so now the archetype is basically a theoretical God. It's a mind definition structure where the term before that for the religious was God. And so you could say that the archetype is speaking in us. That a lot of us have different archetypes in us of ways of thinking, ways of belief of, ideas, ways of thinking about certain ideas the same way. I'm not saying that's not got its truth to it. Because, Tiendo talked about that we were all on strains of mind. So, you want to call them archetypes? Fine. Tiendo didn't call them that. I don't know if they were familiar with the archetype models. I don't know when that terminology was first used. It's interesting right now, when you think about archetype, where did it get I want to look at the origin of that word. Was it archaeological? That would be related to the geography, though, right? Of the Earth, or of any planetary body. Or is it arc as if an arch over, an overriding kind of viewpoint? Where did that come from? I mean, we had the overriding viewpoint of individuals in the record books that were called, in the record book terminology, in the English translation, archangels, when that really means a captain of angels, and what angels really means is a captain of other members of the crew. And while I'm at it that way, that's why I believe that it was the Archangel Michael who was recorded as having come to Daniel by Daniel, even though I know there were some people claiming to be Daniel that weren't Daniel, and some writings, some falsified writings. But I think that's part of what the next level has to try to do, is keep the forgeries from interfering with the main events that they stimulated by coming closer to the planet and even walking among the people in their vehicles, in their spacecrafts, or even in person, if they felt like that was the task to do in order to influence them in a bigger way to their reality, and do it sparingly, and that in the individuals that weren't their eyes weren't open in that regard wouldn't see, when some people that were open in that regard could actually see. And next level members know how to change their vibrations so that humans, even from a range of human abilities, could see them, to see something physical. I mean, physical meaning something that light reflects off of, that can go to our eyes and register as seeing something. Because there's reflections of light that go to our eyes that we don't know how to interpret. And so we don't. And that's part of where you have eyes to see, like Jesus said, that for those who have eyes to see, all sight isn't the same. What's happening both through the design of the eye and its receptors, and then the translation of what's being seen is something that's changeable, so that we can actually see more of what's reality to a subject even. So that's called intuition in some veins of thought, intuition. And I think Kathy has an extraordinary intuition, and like a magnet, not a magnet, but a interface with creatures, and that's big and small, And why is that not possible? Why is that not possible that all the creatures have some kind of commonness to them in this creation? And so if you're somebody that is of a mind of intentionally seeking to communicate with any of the beings, then there's a form of communication that can actually happen. Whether we know it or not, or whether we trust it or not, our interpretation of it or not, is beside the point. It's possible that it could be a reality. Just like thoughts have their reality to them. And you can pick up somebody else's thoughts. You can go into a room and you can feel like, I don't like it here. And you might not really know why. You're just not having a good time at this party. And you might not know why, but it might be because there's people that are thinking things in that room, and there are discarnates in that room supporting the people with their different thinking, and it ends up smelling bad, to somebody that would see that thinking as dark or ugly, and to describe anything about Ti and Do as dark is just not understanding them, not recognizing their minds, and that's understandable. That's understandable. It's even natural. It's even good to have that happen. But if somebody is still attracted to them in some way, shape, or form, then I suggest that's what they focus on, what they're attracted to about them, and allow time to adjust to the things that are troublesome about Ti and Do, for instance. In the way that, T said in 1978, while we were in an outdoor meeting with our folding chairs, we each had a folding chair when we lived outdoors in Wyoming and northern Colorado, and a little bit in Kansas, and a little bit in Mississippi, and a little bit in Utah, and New Mexico a little bit, and Arizona a little bit, and I guess I don't know if I'm leaving anything out that was significant, but those are the main places where we lived. And when we lived in those places, I forgot where I was going when I was trying to remember all those places. All right, I'll just take that as a cue to go to the chat. I got it there, though. I can still see it there. Hambone says, this is an account my vehicle made at the age of about 14, and I have continued to use it here 16 years later. Wow, cool. That's a long-standing account. And then, Jazz says, and for all we know, these are just tools for us to sustain and come to deepen our experience. Yes, everything in this kingdom can be a tool, is a tool, potentially a tool for greater deepening our experience, like the way you said it. Deepening our experience, meaning seeing it better, seeing it dimensionally better, seeing it more objectively, recognizing the value of it in the development of our minds. Because our experience is our mind. Our mind, you don't have experience without the mind. You can run a track, 100-yard dash, and your body is learning while doing that, and the mind of the body is learning to do that. And that is part of our mind. That's more of the subconscious mind that's being trained, even though the conscious mind has to make the body do it. And so it's a training of both. So when somebody is doing something where they're training their body and training their mind to not think certain thoughts is part of that, it's actually working a muscle. That's the way T described it. It's a type of muscle. That doesn't mean it's not physical. It does mean that it is physical. Because because mind has a plasma quality to it. Now, I imagine, and the plasma quality is some type of an element. Some kinds of elements that are being consolidated together, that are being exponentially growing upon each other. I think it's like taking in more gas into the balloon. And the gas becomes more and more compressed to where the amount of power inside that balloon can, when popped, can produce a big sound. In its reaction with the rubber and the sound waves that it's making. And you can apply that to gasoline engines and everything, right? There's a certain amount of power when you take oil and you make it into gasoline or rocket fuel. You're consolidating. I don't know if that's the best word for it. I'm just seeing it in a different way now. Stimulated by your question there. And it feels like a deeper way of looking at it, even though it's an obvious way of looking at it. But, the obvious things are some of the deepest things. I think it's obvious that humans didn't create the animals and the trees and even though they have the seed for them, and we don't have anything in our history that describes making the seeds, even though now they make seeds, they try to make seeds by, injecting different things into them or using different substances to grow them in the plants, and then making some fruits that have no seeds. I don't know if what the effect of that is on that organism, especially in light of the original instruction that we got for this current experiment was to live off of seed-bearing plants. So then if you have a strain of plant that's not going to reproduce, I don't know that that's a terrible thing. It's just that you're not going to be able to grow more with it, right? But whether it actually has physical composition that is less healthy for you, it may not. I don't know how to determine that. Maybe a scientist could evaluate it and find that, when a concentrated dose of that, those substances that are missing from the seed not being developed, then, over a billion years, a human might develop this problem or that ability or that strengthening of their organs or, it's not all negative. Like the way that humans are, manipulating genes is not automatically all negative. Even if they're, even though they're sometimes, even though they're commonly using life forms as their guinea pigs, including humans, including babies, including baby parts. We know they're doing that. You know, they've had, we know there's been breeding campaigns for a long time. It's been, well before the 1900s that they were breeding to try to come up with, the kings, the people that could think or fight the best, or, be the best in making babies, and or in ruling the kingdom, and making the hard decisions for everybody else. Which I don't know if this mind that's with this vehicle ever came from any of the ones that were in the ruling classes. I don't know. It doesn't make any difference. And even to think of it that way, even if it did, to think of it that way as being like elevating any one person, like, I was Cleopatra in a past life, Tiendo would say, Cleopatra, how come there's so many Cleopatras around here? We don't want to be those two witnesses. That's ridiculous. We can't stand that idea. Like telling people that we're the two witnesses in the Bible and Revelation, and then, and then expecting them to, so Tiendo decide, okay, well, I guess if that's who we are, then I guess we should act that part. So they went and printed cards, and they put them up in pulpits, and then they got to the Summit Lighthouse, and they said that the two witnesses were here to talk to your teachers, and the guy said, that can't be because my teachers are the two witnesses. And then Tiendo dropped their jaws, so to speak, and with their tails between their legs, sort of ran out of the church and thought, we're not going to do that again. And so in statement one, it doesn't say anything about the two witnesses, but it says that two people have come because they were two people. And where were two people talked about? Two witnesses. And one was a woman, Revelation 12, and one was a man. And the woman was giving birth to the man. Birth to the throne, not birth to the vehicle, even though the woman was the older member. Yeah, Jehovah. That's right. Part of T's mind came to this planet because it's real. It's a real physical, plasma-like mind that has become very, 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 very large and very, 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 very literally powerful, to where their mind, when a little bit of it is put into the human kingdom by taking over a human vehicle and expressing itself through that human vehicle, is sending out radar signals automatically of what's in their mind. That's the way it works in the human kingdom too. Each of us is sending out what we are. Now, whether somebody else picks up on it or not, it's going to take clues. It's going to take reasons. We're going to have to get in a conversation with somebody to find out if we have like thinking about certain things. Right? And that's when we find out that we do sometimes. And that's how sometimes we form relationships and friendships and things. When we see that, or, of course it happens for other reasons as well that are basically void of that necessarily, being like when people are making pretenses of who they are. Like they go on a date and they want to act a certain way, and they've even read all the dating books and everything, how to talk to somebody and, not to say this and that, on the first date and, all this, the science of dating, which I fortunately didn't really have to experience, which, that can be a learning experience too, so it's not like a bad thing. But, I gotta get some more water, but I know I got way off the subject that I was trying to stay on. Okay, good. Let me get to the... From You Jazz says, what did the class say about having to eat food you dislike? Well, that's very interesting. Because one of the things that we were trying to overcome, conquer, not let run our systems, not let our vehicles react to, was likes and dislikes. Okay? And probably everybody has a certain amount of likes and dislikes that are the same, or in degrees the same, and things that we don't like. Okay? So, and that can also be genetic. And of course, developed from when our vehicles are born. Right? And the things that we tried and didn't try, and the experiences we had with those things. Let's say we tried something and we got sick and threw up. Like Doe said that when he was mixing with high society in Houston, he didn't say it that way. I'm describing the circumstance. But when he would go to parties where they would have shrimp cocktail, it was the rage. Everybody was raving about the shrimp cocktail at this event. And so he felt obliged to try the shrimp. I guess he wasn't raised on shrimp cocktail. And when he tried it for the first time, he went in the bathroom and threw up. But then he decided to maybe try it again. So he got to a place to where, I don't know that he ever liked it, but he would eat it to conform. To not be a stick in the mud to the rest of the people there who were raving about it. Even though it might be a minor stick in the mud, it may not be a stick in the mud at all. But he wanted to please, I guess, the people he was with. And so he did things that he didn't like. So getting back to the question, is that T and Doe tried to give us things that tasted good. They tried to give us things that, to them, and what they thought would be reasonably tasty to others. But it's interesting that I know I'm going to get to the end of this question. But it's interesting that in the beginning of the classroom, from 1975 when I joined in September, to about 1980, so 5 years. No, that's not the right time frame. No, to maybe 1977, say. Just so 2 years. Or a year and a half, maybe. Maybe not even that long. Sorry, I'm going through this. But I want to be accurate. I don't want to be making it into something it's not. Because what I'm going to get to is that they gave us money for food. And we would go to town and buy food. And we didn't have anybody supervising us except one another, the partner that we had. But they didn't give us a list of the things that we could or couldn't have. The only guideline was pay attention to making it last until, for a week or something, or a week, I guess, was the idea. And that it wouldn't require refrigeration past, the first day, whatever. So they weren't saying not buy ice cream or anything like that. So people bought what they wanted. And and I could go through that. So that was the beginning when we were in Wyoming. And then the way I think about it is we were in a camp in northern Colorado, which I think was after we went back down to Texas for the winter and then came back up for the spring, summer, and fall to Colorado, where we lived on ranch land. And we had, on a big ranch that had a schoolhouse on it, a one-room wooden log cabin that was a schoolhouse at one time, who knows how long ago. And we were camped right there, and we used the schoolhouse to play Pac-Man, and because we had Pac-Man at that time. And that was like 1970. 6, 7, or 8. I'm not sure exactly that part of the timeline. I did try to write things down many years ago, so I do have a kind of a timeline, but it's not that detailed. But but it was during, like, let's say it was 1977 when they instigated the NutriLab as a nutrition lab, as being the kitchen, but in new terminology. And they said that food was fuel, and that that they wanted us to think about it as fuel as opposed to being a sensory experience, even though they wanted the fuel to taste good and be nutritious and be hot when it was supposed to be hot and be cold when it was supposed to be cold, and have proportionate amounts of things relative to what T&O would determine, because they were the ones that were doing all the shopping at that point, instead of giving us money to go shopping, which stopped actually when we had a supply tent. Before that, before there was a NutriLab, there were supply tents, and T&O would go get the supplies and put them in the supply tent, and then they would have a crew assigned to go get the supplies and put them in the supply tent, and even go around to all the tents that we had and give people a certain amount of flour and a certain amount of staples. Okay, so that was the beginning of being on the diet that T&O gave for us. And that was, pasta and I think biscuits and chili maybe sometimes, and a pasta with meat sauce and pasta with just tomato sauce or cheese sauce, or with not too much cheese in it, but or Parmesan or the peppers, flakes, having the condiments, different condiments, and and just get to the end of the question, when I still might talk about it further, is that one time okra was put into the diet, and this was after T left her vehicle, I believe, the way I remember it. That dough brought okra, and it wasn't fried okra. It was okra cooked so that it was like it was slimy. And the first time I tried it, I was gagging in my mind. I gagged a little bit. And then I tried to take it in very small doses, and I was able to get past the gag reflex. And I didn't say anything about it. I tried to like it. And Doe at one point said that he knew that some were having trouble with it. And he didn't change it right away. And I got to a point to where I could tolerate it. That I wasn't gagging anymore. And I was eating it very slow, and I was telling my mind that it was no big deal. I didn't have to, think of it as with that gagging response. It was something about that, I guess, program that I had. Where some people, they can go to, oysters on the half shell, and they can be down on them left and right, and they're awful, mushy, gooey. I don't like that. That's not attractive to me. I'm not that kind of a vehicle programming to enjoy that. I don't like raw things. Even though I was fed raw meat by my mother, and I did like that. She would take the ground beef and that she would buy, and then she would mix it with eggs and breadcrumbs, and not too many breadcrumbs though, but eggs mostly, and salt and pepper. And then she would give me little chunks of it. And I never had more than like a couple chunks at a time. Maybe it was good for the bacteria in the colon to have some of that. They say it makes worms. Well, I guess, it depends on the beef, I guess, and the combination of fat and where the fat came from. I don't know how the worms develop, or if they can be conquered by an immune system, okay, or digested, okay. They can be, there's animals that eat worms. So there's no reason to believe that humans couldn't potentially do that too. But grubs, right? So anyway, so I didn't like the okra, and so we might have had it in maybe, I'm going to say like 4 meals, because it wasn't every meal. It was just one meal of the day, the heavy protein meal, whatever that was, even if it was vegetarian, which a lot of times it was at that time, because we were experimenting with all kinds of things. Pretty much everything that you could experiment with, we experimented with. And Doe canceled sometimes, like thinking about being a breatharian. He was thinking about starting with that, so that we weren't even going to drink water. And then after the first day of no water, he added water. And then we went another 12 days on just water. And the experience of that was good, and it was challenging. I still had energy to function. I don't know if I continued it much longer. Well, one thing detriment from it would have been the digestive system stops. I don't know, and it actually proved that the body can go through its own kind of metamorphosis to where it atrophies certain systems, and those systems can be re-stimulated to function again. That goes to the idea that a member of the next level's body could still, a certain model of that body could still be stimulated to go through a reverse metamorphosis to where it could then uh, uh, um, be mammalian and even have organs for reproduction and use them and reproduce offspring, like T and Do both felt Adam went through a reverse metamorphosis. And it looks like a little thing that, where Adam made mistakes, but to the next level, little things can be very big things when they're in a certain department. Like if you are in the crew of a member of the next level, which I don't consider that I ever have been. I don't know if I was given a vehicle after the first or second. I doubt after the first anybody would be given a vehicle. I think some were probably given vehicles after their Jesus experience. But I don't know if I was among them. My soul, if I was in that Jesus experience, was probably, was maybe just put on ice, whatever that means. But that could also be a condition of having some observation of the next level. Maybe I was allowed to be in a room where I could perceive their thoughts or something, certain kinds of their thoughts through the soul body. I don't know how that might work, but I just know that I feel like right now I'm being given a little help to see different ways of thinking about it, even though I might not be interpreting them correctly. But you can have, what I'm trying to describe is that we can have studentship in every condition, because the next level they take advantage of all growth. And goodness, they don't waste goodness. So if any human is developing goodness, and the next level can see it, they don't want to waste it. That's why it takes so long for them to have a certain measurement and judgment of whether somebody still has some of that spark of life in them. That is best described as goodness, kindness, being nice to one another. I mean, that doesn't mean that we can't have a argument with somebody. I mean, it doesn't mean that we're going to necessarily not stumble and say things to that person that we later wish we wouldn't have, or wish we could have said it in a better way to not offend them. Or that doesn't mean we're not going to suffer if that person asks us for our way of seeing something, and we say it, and they feel a little hurt by it. Because nobody in the next level gloats over somebody having difficulty. But they understand that it's through that difficulty that they can get to be a stronger and stronger mind. But that doesn't mean that they still don't feel for the process. Feel have heartfelt feeling, even though they don't have hearts in the way that humans have hearts. They don't have blood systems. Well, they may have some fluid systems in their vehicles. So I shouldn't say that. I don't know exactly about that. But they definitely have different organs than humans have. So then Do changed it and took ochre off the menu. I didn't ever complain about it. I didn't say anything about it. I was able to adjust to it. But the ones that did have a aversion to it, they might Doe might have said, well, you don't have to eat that. But he would have also said about that you should try it, even though you had it in your mind that you couldn't stand that. Or now, if you had an allergy to it, that you knew that when you ate that thing, you were going to get a rash, then he asked us for that. They asked us for that right in the very beginning, whether if any of us had allergies, to write a note to them of what they were allergic to, so that when they had that supply tent, they weren't buying things that somebody was going to be allergic to, and they wouldn't have that. And if somebody told them about it after the fact, then they would take it off the menu. They weren't trying to push us in the ways that humans would probably try to do if the humans were operating such an organization. Because humans would probably say, tough it out, tough it out. You know, like you see in the stories about the way children were raised in boarding houses and things. You know, to not be a baby and not, and have a stiff upper lip, and being able to handle diversity and pain, and and yeah, there's all good things about that. It's not like those things are terrible things to develop. But to force people to develop them by other humans forcing it, Tiendo didn't force us anything. Not one iota did they force anybody to do anything. We could have left at any time, and people did. We know that there were about 100 individuals in Wyoming. Those talked about it, and you can hear it in tapes. And it got down to about half that pretty quickly. But I think we were numbered in the 60s when we received the Odie names. That was approximately 1977, 78. Maybe 76, it's possible. 77, it's confusing to me. I wasn't paying attention to calendars at all. We didn't have jobs. The only time we went to town was either to buy groceries or on a task to do something to fix a car, or to go to meetings in Laramie, Wyoming, in the college, where they would somehow be able to use a room that someone arranged for us to use for the group, so that we could be out of the bugs and elements, the wind and the problems with being, having meetings outdoors, which we had plenty of. And we didn't have big tents at first, but then when we were in that place that had the schoolhouse on it, we had 2 big tents. One was for the Nutrilab, and one was for meetings. The green tent was for meetings. It was kind of a khaki green. And the other one was a darker color, and it was an old army tent. And it was bigger. And we had propane stoves, and we had porta potties that were, and we dug holes and poured the waste into the holes every day. Whoever was doing the BC crew, the bath chamber. No, those weren't bath chambers necessarily, because there were separate places for people to use the liquid and solid waste. That's the terminology we used for our waste, liquid and solid waste. Because they were trying to also give us the ability to use the discipline on our brains, so that we weren't thinking of things in the old ways of thinking. We're now thinking about T and Do's way of thinking about it by using the terminology they gave us. That were more clinical a lot of times. Didn't have a judgment to them. You know, like solid waste doesn't sound the same as shit. Right? I mean, it's... not that that was a big part of it, but the idea of accepting their terminology and then using that terminology and then asking your partner to tell you when you're not using that terminology, to remind you, which you may or may not be doing, ask your partner that, because the last time that you asked your partner that and your partner said you didn't use the right terminology there when you were in the middle of a little bit of a heated argument, and it's like somebody in an argument, pointing out that they didn't use the right word. They didn't use that right word in the scripture to describe what you're supposed to do, and so therefore I can't, I can't listen to you anymore. You were bad. You committed a sin by using that swear word. I'm putting a drawl on it because, it's associated with the religious Christians, in the Bible Belt, which, there are people that are still very backwards to the nth degree, and yet they're holding powers of being in the White House and being in the heads of corporations or whatever. That are acting very primitive and adversarial. Satan, that word means adversary. Well, I can tell you that I think we should try to get along with the government so that we don't have them as our adversary. And Jesus taught that as well, and T and Do taught it as well. But they weren't teaching it because Jesus said it. They didn't care about what Jesus said, hardly at all. I'm saying hardly at all, I'm saying care. I wonder if a crew member just gave me that joke, saying they didn't care about it. Because that wouldn't be right. Let me get a drink. They weren't making any decisions based on Jesus' life. Now, I'm not saying Do didn't sometimes. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that T didn't. Because she said that. I don't know if Do felt exactly the same way about it. Or if there were certain things that Jesus said that that did give him clarity of certain ideas that he was having. Because both T and Do were receiving a very real communication at the same time. That they would compare with each other when they were receiving it for the first 9 months. From when they met in approximately March or April of 1972 to where they were writing after they left Houston behind, because they had all kinds of, both the vehicles' families were against them, and both thought that the other one was T's vehicles husband that she divorced during that time um, thought at first that they were having an affair, and would sometimes see Doe Marshall Applewhite at an intersection. I guess he was pretty obvious. He stood out pretty much because he had a sports car that was a convertible sports car. It was like a two-seater that he drove around in. Because, he was an opera star with the Houston Grand Opera. He was the lead singer in a bunch of operas. And he was teaching choir, and he was teaching voice set privately to students. And he was an excellent piano player. I only saw him play piano one time, and it looked pretty elaborate. It was right on the top of his head. He didn't have to look at music or anything. He could just... I mean, he did a little bit of something one time when we were in the place that they designed that was called Astrologics, where we did astrology charts for the public in Amarillo, Texas, in about 1982 or 3. 1, 2, or 3. I'm not sure exactly when it was. Around that time. Around the time that it started making tapes, because Black Hawk is tape number 25, 26, and 27, I believe. The Black Hawk 3 tapes that were done during one session in Black Hawk, Colorado, or it might have been 2 sessions. But up at 9,000 feet, where they had the house that we went to as a retreat. Anyway, but we had Astrologics, where one person was making stained glass art by himself. He didn't have a partner on that task. Alodi was doing his paintings with using an airbrush and other tools to make the rings of Saturn. I watched him paint some of the rings of Saturn. I only stood there and watched him paint, for a few minutes, because I always generally had tasks to do, or not. I didn't necessarily have something to do all the time. I would spend time reading from the library and trying to be helpful where I could be helpful. If students, were doing a task and they needed help with something. When I was at Astrologics, and I was doing astrology charts, for the time I was doing progressions of people's future. And I never met the people. I only did it probably for maybe 3 people at the most before that whole operation was discontinued by T&O, and we moved to a different state, I think, or it may move south to San Antonio from there, maybe. I don't know. We moved so much. Anyway, I'm just covering a lot of little things related to our lifestyle, the actual things happening in our lives, instead of, the more philosophical-minded ways of thinking about things. But, so if you didn't like the food, then you could report it. You could write a note. We always had the ability to write notes to T&O, and every day notes would be taken from the person that was gathering them from each of the groups that was operating. Or you'd have a place to put it on a spindle. That was a central location where you could put your note addressed to T&O on the front, or they settled on putting links on the front of it instead of their personal names, because they were both operating as links in the chain of mind to the Chief of Chiefs. And so you'd put it in a note, and what we learned the way that a member of the next level would do that would be to recognize that their vehicle had a response to this and what the response was. So if you broke out in a rash of some sort, you got a pimple of some sort right after you ate that food, then that's what you would say. And then it was up to then you weren't suggesting the solution, because in a next level lab, it would be like going to the nurse's office and telling the nurse what medicine to give you. Now, in the human kingdom, we can know that we want a certain kind of medicine for something. Like Kathy wants to get some erythromycin for her tooth problem, but she's having success with solving it with her mind. Maybe she's not biting down as much, and she's programming herself to clear it out. Power to her. I think she has the power of mind to do it. There's a lot of power in the mind. It's literal power. Certain conditions are harder than others. Depends on how long the condition's been going and how much damage has been done to the vehicle by a certain condition. Whether the mind can reverse it, and the mind has to be, that's for me. I use the meditation that Tiendo gave us of envisioning the light being synonymous with the mind of the next level, of the creators, of the highest source we can imagine, coming into our heads through the pineal gland area of the body, right in the top of the head. And then going through every cell of the body, healing every cell of the body, which includes the mind cells that maybe stimulating negative thoughts, getting rid of them, watching that happen, and knowing that, and cleaning, and also healing the cells of all their any kind of disharmony they have. It's like taking a dose of polarity that puts more energy in the cell to combat, so that there's a homeostasis that can be achieved by each cell. Now, if the vehicle is very clogged up with mucus, then it's got a bigger challenge of cleaning out the cells. And a fast can do it, can help do it. By fasting on liquids, for instance, can be a way of getting rid of toxins. But it depends on what you're putting into it as well. And so, Kathy's been experimenting with liquid diet, and I watched her go through it, and it's amazing. She's very sensitive to small amounts of things that I could probably eat a boatload of and probably wouldn't recognize a change. But she's sensitive to little slight changes in her mind and body. And gets clues, of course, from, the problems that the body has, and then changes. Looks for the things that, and I do the same thing. What's stimulating that ache and pain? And maybe not doing that, or not doing it as often, or doing it in a different way. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that much more. But, so when you wrote a note about something giving you a problem, like consuming, then T and O might deal with it in different ways. They might call you to the on the phone if they happen to be at a distance from us, and they might say, "Well, why don't you take this enzyme that helps you digest proteins better if you're having a lot of gas, for instance." Or maybe you can use some naturalax, some Seneca, herbs to help against constipation, for example. As just an example of what they would do. And they would prescribe that person that, and then there was a medical crew that would come around and administer that to the person according to the dose. And if that didn't solve the problem, then they would try something else. And if it was something that was beyond their capacity to handle, like if they needed stitches, then we would go to a hospital or something and get stitches. Even though we had a nurse on staff that could do a good job with stitches. I think Liv Odie probably could have done that because she did stitch. I know that she could have done a good job with that. Anyway, she was a registered nurse. Right, it sounds like summer camp, buddy, right? You don't like okra, old school Dave? Yeah, healthy fuel, old school Dave, that's right. Oh, I'm missing some things that were said. So let me see if I can catch up with you all. Uh, and things wouldn't stay on the menu. Because Doe was always very sensitive to it, and he paid attention to what students said about things that he put on the menu. And and T was the one that designed the first diet for us, and she was the one that stimulated the beginning of the pink drinks, which was a protein shakes with I think a little bit of apple juice for some sweetness, and grape juice also we had at one point that wasn't mixed with anything. We actually had a juice lab. I was in the juice lab measuring juices, and then also there were supplements within that. And then we ended up having the pink drinks that became part of the juice lab to make. And so we would measure out the different, like we had protein powder. That is what gave it the pink tone to the drink. And it was white powder. It was kind of a whitish powder. But then we added to that wheat germ, and we added to that lecithin. And what else did we add to that? Molasses. Or maybe the molasses we took separately as a supplement at that time, like a tablespoon of blackstrap molasses. And we had raisins sometimes. But during the pink drink time, we had nothing solid for a time. And then when I got vertigo, they added yeast rolls that we made ourselves. And it felt like we needed yeast in our diet. And so they gave it to us, and that seemed to solve the vertigo problem for me. We had them once a day, 2 yeast rolls, I think it was, and like a patty of butter was put in each. They were made like a 4-leaf clover, and so you'd open it up and you'd put a thin patty of, not real thin, but like a teaspoon of butter in each one on the top of it when it was served, and they were made fresh, and we ate them right away. They were planned, and we made them in stages so that we'd have them every day. Right, and we made the dough, and I was in the yeast lab. We called it the yeast lab. And we wore yellow aprons, where the Nutrilab wore blue aprons. And T would come into the yeast lab and see if we had any questions, sometimes. A lot of times because she got a note about something, and because our bread wasn't coming out right, it was falling, so she didn't necessarily need a note, because she was eating the same food. She was living in the same house at that time. That was in, I think, South Texas, in the Kerrville area. It was a big old house, I remember, because it was like 3 floors. And the basement floor was all finished. So we had a lab down in the basement for making, we put an oven down there. And so we were making cinnamon rolls down there too for first experiment. And then I think the cinnamon rolls, we sometimes had hot chocolate with it. We didn't have coffee. And hot teas were generally only in the evening after the heavy protein experiment. In the 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock time. We went to bed about 9:55, I think, was the downtime, and 5:55 was the uptime. 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would be 8 hours. And then they installed the option to have 7 hours sleep by choice. And then it became, sometime after that, it became 6 hours minimum and 8 hours maximum. And sometimes if somebody had a special circumstance and they needed a nap, then they would have a nap, or they would call a nap for the whole crew. So we'd get 9 hours rest. And even if we didn't rest, we would stay in our bunks. And we could always do a meditation or, in our bunks, learn to quiet our minds and be still during that time period. Living a life of discipline is very, you can talk to people that are monks and other people that have disciplines every day that do things, go to the track or, the exercise routines. They have their values of having things that we do that we feel good about, give us a certain sense of, exercise of our vehicles. I mean, our vehicles need exercise. It helps the cells breathe. And I think I need to help my cells breathe right now. So what am I going to do it with? Corn chips. I try to stay away from wheat, but I still eat it every day in one form or another. One more minute. You were talking about your outdoor living and having a folding chair. You were telling us something Doe said at an outdoor meeting. Oh, great. Thank you, Old School Dave. Thanks a lot for that. And what he said to us at that meeting that shocked Doe, which we only learned about after T was gone, was that you need to give us your will. You need to give us your will. Don't you think that somebody left after that meeting? Well, pretty soon after that meeting, some left. That's for sure. That was like 1977. Or 78. So it wasn't the average person that joined and just stayed with them for, followed around for a week or a month or a year. It was like 2 years at least. Well, I don't know exactly when that was said, so I shouldn't say that, but it's probably over a year would be safe. So, right, so people are going to find fault with that, and of course, why wouldn't they? They don't know, they don't, how many people out there consider that somebody would not have a problem with that. But I didn't have a problem with it. I knew that that was the program. I didn't have to hear that. So it wasn't, it was, but that's some of my religious programming, that you give your will to God. But see, that's not a bad thing unless the God is a fake God. And that's what we have dominating this planet. Fake gods. The ideas of gods without the overview of the real ones, the only real ones. Which can seem insane. I know that's the case. I mean, at the same time, it makes sense. Why wouldn't? I mean, think of the majesty of this, or everything that humans have not literally been the producers of. All the elements, all the life forms. Humans are not, you don't have any labs now. If humans were the ones that made these things, then why would humans not be able to do it? Why did they forget how to make these seeds or these beings? How did they forget how to make those beings? Wouldn't they still be making them? Don't we see the evolution of mind happening in society? Through the history books that we have, that there's a certain amount of things that humans are able to do more and more and more, and they can see more and more of what exists in the microscopes and the telescopes, and they can use the substances in more and more ways. They can produce all kinds of medicines for things. They can build skyscrapers. They can blow up nuclear bombs. They can use nuclear fission for producing energy for our lights and everything. And I don't know if there's any fusion reactors or they're all fusion or fission. I don't know which one. I don't know the difference between those. But I know there's some kind of difference. But I mean, so we see the progression. So why would we think that there's not also some kind of a progression to the life forms that we don't see any evidence that humans put together? We can see the cars they made. We can see the rockets. We can see the way that babies are made. We can see that, of course. But we're not the ones that determined that that baby was going to have blue eyes. Do we? Can we change the eye color of a baby? Maybe they can now. I know they're working on it, designer babies. That's a big project too, because they can make a lot of money with that. For the people that have so much money that they don't know what to do with it. But so humans are still trying to figure out how to do everything. And so then when you have Three-Eye Atlas come along and defies all their physics from what they understand about all the things that are happening in space that they've been watching for the last 100 years in earnest, at least, ever since the first telescopes were made. But even before that, they could see, especially when the atmosphere wasn't so polluted, they could probably see better. But so why wouldn't this creation be an example of how great whatever it was that brought this about was? Could it all happen by accident? Well, give me an example in the human kingdom of something happening by accident. Right? Now tell me now that accident, let's say it's leaves are falling from the tree. Is it accidental where they land? Doesn't it depend on the content of the air? How much the wind's blowing? The angles on the leaf itself, whether it's can do a little bit of floating or not as it falls to the ground, and then and does every leaf land in exactly the same way? So that's accidental, right? Now, can you take that and have it be an accidental system that when you do certain things in a certain way, they come up with the same results? So how do you make the accident have the same result every time? Well, you'd have to control the wind, right? You have to control the not just the wind, but how much density of moisture is in the air. Let's say when you have a big fog, I don't know if a leaf falls down from that a little slower or a little differently. So now you need another system in order to guarantee that accident can systematically fall to the ground. Okay, so then how are you going to accidentally have, well, they have the survival of the fittest, right? That they say that the bird's beaks adapted to being able to crush certain seeds that were hard to crush. That they adapted to it because of the lack of other kinds of seeds. So they kept on working at it. And so maybe some of the beaks got damaged by trying to consume the harder seeds. But if they survived it and then they produced offspring, then maybe they passed on those seeds, those genes, to where the bone got better, got stronger, got exercised. Like you exercise a muscle, it gets stronger. Exercise a bone, and you got the right nutrients in it, it can produce a better bone that's got some flexibility as well as some tensile strength. So you can see that So then you can apply that to, well, uh, um, I mean, you can just play with those ideas, and you can actually, I think you can logically say that certain things can keep on happening because of the adaptation. 20 minutes. Because of the adaptation that's happening. And so that's where I guess a system can develop from something that was accidental to begin with. I guess. I don't know. It just seems like having, organ systems in the body that you need. Like if you don't have blood organs, sending blood to all the organs of the body, then those organs die. So what kind of survival of the fittest made it that way? How did that come about? But yet we can see that we can we can make different parts we can learn that a combustion engine can be built by experimenting with things and harnessing that power to turn gears, and then, or steam, the steam engine. We know that there's elements, those things, but they didn't come up with the steam engine that quickly. But steam would have been easy to make even 1,000 years ago. And maybe they were using steam engines in China and stuff way before they happened in Europe. I don't remember that history, but another reason why things happen the same way in a lot of different places is because the same conditions exist. And the next level is working with the beings on Earth in the same ways, to even have the same 3 days of healing for a vehicle to heal itself from death. If the next level wants that to happen, they have the technology for that. And they even built that technology into the vehicle so that having a positive mindset about things can be part of the healing of our ailments. And using that meditation is another technique of focusing that mind on our cellular healing. Now, the next level doesn't want, healing for the sake of healing is one thing. But healing to we can do the techniques. We can do all the techniques. And we can heal ourselves and that of some things, and other things we might not be so successful with. Like I said, because of the genetics and how far things have gone in a certain direction, and the power of the mind to begin with, the atmosphere of this planet is a decaying atmosphere. So there's certain limitations. We know we have limitations. Anybody that says that we're not limited is ridiculous, except in the theoretical, not the theoretical, in the altruistic or the ultimate point of view that we're not limited. But that's going to mean that if we have access to solutions to problems, we're going to find them. But if we don't have access to a certain solution to a problem, then we might not find it, because we're not in control of this earth and our lifespans that much yet. Doesn't mean that left to keep on going, they might be able to be. But what would humans do with the ability to create humanoid beings equivalent to us in a designer way? to where they had all the skills that you would want to like go into a war and fight and all do that. That's what they would do. They would conquer everybody because they would find reasons to do that. And they would think that they had to defend the earth against these beings in Three-Eye Atlas that they've heard might be coming to recycle. So then they would be in danger, and therefore anything goes to try to protect the earth from being recycled, because they don't think that they have the right to do that. If they don't think that they're the ones that created it in the first place. Even though they didn't create the responses to their creation. That's where the free will is. The responses to the creation. Let me go back to the chat room. It was like summer camp in some ways, but it was much different in most ways. I went to summer camp at Camp Don Bosco. It was a Christian Catholic camp, actually, in upstate in the Catskill Mountains in New York. Do you communicate to or with your vehicle? Well, yes, I do. And like I've been talking about, like, I mean, if your vehicle gets like yawning and you're in the car, right? And you want to get to home, so you're like forcing your eyes to be awake. That's communicating with your vehicle. You're not just letting them close and drift into unconsciousness and then crash on the side of the road. And so you can control. You're communicating with your vehicle every time you take command over your vehicle, and your vehicle is just not operating automatically. And when you hear what your vehicle is doing, when you see what how the vehicle is acting, and you respond to it, you're also communicating with the vehicle. The programs of the vehicle. They are programs. That's why we can train the vehicle to do all kinds of things by repetition. On the same note as Fork's question, I was wondering if that had any influence on your current living situation. Does being nomadic remind you of the old days, camping to and fro and whatnot? Well, yes, to some degree. Nomadic living doesn't sound too bad. No, it's not necessarily bad. It's got its difficulties. Especially when your nomadic living requires gasoline to go to the next town, and you can't exactly make gasoline. It would be nice if the engines ran off of water. That would be the greatest thing. Instead of having to run off of electricity made by, the government, that they can regulate and they can charge us what they want for it the same way we charge for oil. Even though it's cheaper now, but with all these data centers going up, it may be more and more expensive to charge electric vehicles, but maybe not. I think that might be a good way to go. Nomadic living doesn't sound different. Right. So, Aaron Nathaniel, hello. And actor Michael Merchant, what is one of your fondest memories of the class? Every meeting was a fond memory. It was a fond memory. When I listen to the meetings now, I'm like there. I'm enthralled. I'm like having fun. Doesn't mean it's easy. It's not. It's challenging, actually. But I mean, I'm not going to say that. I mean, when we had a dessert, I enjoyed the desserts. We had some good desserts a lot of times. We made them ourselves a lot of times. That was, nice. When we would see a fun movie, that was fun. That was nice. I enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed. It's more that what are the things I didn't enjoy. Like one time we moved. We were living outdoors, and we moved all our tents. Took down all our tents, because we had about uh, 30 tents, or I guess something about that. And each partnership took down their own tent, and packed it up and put it in the car, and then T and Do would say where we were going to go. And in this one case, we went to another part of the same property. And I was tired. It was hot. It was in either northern Colorado or southern Wyoming. And I was tired, and the instruction was that place where we set it up the first time, we packed up and set up somewhere. And then they said that they wanted us to move it again. They didn't say it that way, but we got the word that wasn't where they wanted us to be. So that wasn't a fond memory, but I pushed through it, and I did it, and I moved, and I'm glad I did, because I was giving in to my vehicle's tiredness. T and Do didn't give in to their vehicle's tiredness. But if it was falling asleep at the wheel, then they would stop and sleep, take a nap. But the nap didn't have to be 3 hours. It might be just a half an hour. Sometimes they gave us a 20-minute nap to take when they saw that our brains weren't working well in that outdoor environment. So there's nothing really that comes to mind as a fondest memory. Now, if you asked me what was my fondest memory of living in Oregon before the classroom, living in Newport, and I would say playing music with my friends. Oh yeah, I was fond of singing when we sang at a 4-piece choir. So I should say that. That was fun. That was a lot of fun. Because we did that quite a bit that first year, which happened to be the December before T left our vehicle on June 19th, 1985. The only time, or the first time, we celebrated a type of Christmas. And the second time, after T left, the next December. He might have did a little something special every December after that. I don't remember exactly. I know it wasn't like a ritual or anything. We didn't really have any rituals. Oh yeah, other fond memories of the class was when my classmates would shine sometimes, uh, when I would see them, uh, um, you know, I wasn't that tuned into my classmates. There was a certain amount of aloofness in our relationships because we weren't trying to become best buds or coffee clutchers, or shoot the breeze. We didn't shoot the breeze, and I was okay with that. So there was no hanging out. I mean, it doesn't mean that if somebody went to get an oil change and or to wash the car and they met somebody there and they started to talk, that wasn't like a type of hanging out like was depicted by the individual that had the car washing place while the class was visiting them, and Tolodi, I believe, was there, and the guy Tolodi gave somebody in that place that they would visit over and over, like a talisman kind of object that he cleared with tea and dough, or dough, because I think tea was out. Yeah, tea was definitely outside our vehicle at the time that happened. Well, folks, I think I didn't get into the other things here. Some of them I talked about yesterday anyway, about the revelation. Really wasn't, uh, um, it's really inaccurate to say that they, uh, that there's no evidence that the revelation materials inspired Tiendo. Um, uh, Not really. Not inspired, because inspiration, the only inspiration I think they got, or the primary inspiration, was dough from T and dough from T's older member, however that worked, while T was in her vehicle, and from T directly when T was outside her vehicle, and when Doe would feel like she was present in some way, which he didn't get verification of that I ever heard him talk about. In fact, I think he longed for T's physical presence. And I think when he no longer longed for it, I think he might have got it. But I don't know. Maybe he didn't need it. But some of the classmates needed it. And overall, the classmates needed it as a test. Because some got it, the verification of the two beings that Rio reported dreaming about, that others said they saw while they were awake, crossing the hallway and standing over a classmate in their bunk, that were like phosphorescent, the size of 4-foot children beings.